Hello everybody and welcome back to part 2 of our elk hunting seminar, how to kill an elk on your first trip to Colorado. So again, my name is Jordan Blankenship. I am a resident of Colorado. I was a former Midwest elk hunter. So I kind of went through all of this same stuff that you probably are right now when coming to the state for the first time. But since moving here, I feel like I've learned a lot about kind of how the state works and how to take advantage of it. So if you watch part 1 of our video, which is the Colorado draw and the over-the-counter tag system, hopefully you have a good idea of what tags are available to you and how to acquire them. So now part 2 is going to be jumping into OnX. You can see the big screen behind me, and how to e-scout this state when you're not here and can't put boots on the ground. So most of the scouting I do, even as a resident of Colorado, is on this laptop right here, is e-scouting. So I'm gonna go over all the settings and then the tips and the tricks I use. I'm gonna bring you right into my laptop so you can see OnX and how I use it. And then we're gonna go over kind of how to pick a unit using OnX and how to find an area that's gonna be best for you and your group and the style of hunts you like to do and how to tell what units are gonna be best for you. So let's go ahead and jump right in. We're gonna make this screen big. We're gonna get right to it. Hello everybody. So before we jump into OnX and actually start scouting units and some of the tools we use, it's really important that we understand the draw process, because most of the units in Colorado, especially if you're coming out for the first time, you're not going to be able to hunt. You're either not going to have enough preference points or it's not going to be available to you in the draw. So I have Top Rut pulled up here, which if you have an OnX Elite membership, it comes with it. If you don't have OnX Elite, if you're just using OnX to map 1 or 2 states, I suggest at least for the month that you are doing your research, you pay for a monthly subscription or something with one of the sites, Top Rut, Huntin' Fool. There's some other sites out there that can kind of break down the draw odds for you, and I suggest using one of those. That way you're not going into the draw blind. If you have any questions about the draw process, part 1 of our video, we extensively go into the draw, how to take advantage of it, what units you can draw with low points, and stuff like that. So before we start looking at the maps, the OnX maps, we want to make sure we're only looking at units that we can actually hunt. It does us no good to waste time looking at units that we can't hunt when we come out. So this is Top Rut. You can see it's got all the states on here, but we are only interested in right here, Colorado elk. Click on it. I already have it filtered, but I'll show you over here, residency status. We're going to assume we're a non-resident. We're doing Colorado elk, and then we're going to do from the drop down here, the minimum points required is what you're going to want to be on if you're just trying to search for units that you can hunt. So we're going to do minimum points required archery. We're going to click this, and then we can actually search this by draw odds. So if we come over here, this is going to tell us our draw odds for 2022. We're going to click it. Usually draw odds don't change a lot, but just a rule of thumb is usually it gets harder to draw a unit, not easier every year, because there's more and more hunters. However, if we look here, we'll scroll down. If you don't understand what all of this means, the hunt code, the archery type, that is okay. Again, part 1 of the video, we cover all of this extensively, hunt codes, the draw, all of that. For this purpose though, we're only just trying to figure out units that we can actually draw. You'll come down the list and you will see all of these units here have a 100% draw rate at 0 points. And that is for non-residents. So if you're non-resident with 0 points, you can draw any of these hunt codes and any of these tags. So what you want to do is you want to write down all of these units, or whichever units you think you might want to look into. So you're going to want to look into all of this, write these all down. I'm trying to find some units here. Unit 7, 60% at 0 points. So that unit you have a little bit better than half, you have a 60% chance of drawing Unit 7. The cool thing about Unit 7 is if you draw, you can also hunt Unit 8, 9, 19, and 191. So essentially what that means is you're not relegated to just this unit, and you can click on it and it's going to give you all kinds of information on it. And then if you have your OnX linked to your top rut, it's really cool because what it's going to do is once this loads, it's actually going to pull up this unit over here to our right. And looky there, you can actually see the unit and you can see how much public land and everything is in the unit. You can scroll down. It gives you the different seasons for the unit, and then if you go even farther, you can see how many points were required in 2019, 2021, and 22. 0 points. So people with 0 points have drawn this unit for the past 4 years, which is really good. So this has just been a brief overview, like I said, into how to find units that you can draw. Again, if you have more than 0 points, if you've been putting in for the system for a little while, you can go down and see the 1 point units, the 2 point units, vice versa. But this is kind of the first step to e-scouting, is you want to make sure you can actually draw the unit that you want to scout. So now that we know we can draw any of these units and we've made our list, we're going to jump into scouting for some units on OnX. So let's go ahead and close these tabs and jump into OnX. So like we said before, once you get your units kind of listed down where you know what you can draw or what areas are available to hunt you depending on your points, or if you want to hunt over the counter, that's really going to narrow down the areas that you can actually hunt. Everybody's hunting kind of style and tactics are different, so I can't get into real specific as to what will be best for you, but I will try to get down specifically areas and kind of different hunting tactics for what you might be used to, so you can hopefully pick a unit that's best for you or your group that's coming out. So first things first, this is OnX. If you don't have OnX, I would recommend getting it. I find it to be the best mapping system, plus this is what I'm going to show you today. So if you're watching this, you probably already have OnX or are planning on getting it anyway. I already have all of my kind of filters set, but I'm going to go through and show you exactly what I do to get everything set up for when I'm looking at units. So first thing I do is I come over here to the satellite. I always turn it on hybrid. Hybrid is just going to be an overlay of the satellite and the topo map together. If you don't know how to read topo maps, get on YouTube and learn how to read topography maps. It's going to make your life so much easier when you're out in Colorado scouting or hunting or whatever you're doing in general. So once we have the topo map set, we're going to come up here to hunt layers. You can see here Colorado. When I click on it, I have the Colorado government lands turned on. And I'm going to zoom in here and kind of show you what it does. Essentially, the government lands is going to show you all of the state and federal land, which is typically the public land that you can hunt. So if you switch it on and off, you'll see how the map changes quite a bit. You'll also see that most of the state west of I-25, west of Denver, is public land. So you want to have that on, that way you can see what areas are available to hunt you. The next really important detail is make sure you have your units tab on. You'll see again when we click this on and off, you'll see the units show up and the units go away. These green lines are basically the boundaries of the hunt units. When you zoom in a little bit, we zoom in over here, it's going to tell you that's unit 99. So as you zoom in and out, you'll be able to see more and more detail. But the units tab is going to allow you to see what units you're actually looking at, because you don't need to be looking at units that you can't hunt. I always turn these two on, Colorado possible access and Colorado walk-in access. There's not a lot of land that qualifies under this, although I don't want to miss any. If it is possible, if it's huntable, I want to be able to see it. So I make sure these two are on as well. Second thing, land access. Wilderness areas. I always make sure to have this on. That is because that is the kind of hunting I like to do, and we'll get into that a little more here in a second, what wilderness areas mean, but you can flip it on and off to kind of see. You'll see the wilderness areas are these white striped areas. And then roads, trails, and recreation. So I always turn my trails tab on. One thing about Colorado, and this is just a tip for me and a lot of the guys who've been out here, is you want your trails on when you're looking at OnX, but also when you're hunting in Colorado, you're going to be using the trails. That is how you're going to get around your unit. That's how you're going to get around while you're hunting. There are trails, if you look down here, that are motorized. And we're going to click down here. You can decide whether you want to see motorized trails or motorized roads. There is a difference. Typically, a motorized trail is going to be a trail that you can take a side-by-side, a four-wheeler, a dirt bike, something like that down, where motorized roads are going to be areas that you can take a truck down, but it's probably better off for you to use a side-by-side. But if you do want to take your truck down, you can. Think of these as more as like Jeep trails and really gnarly kind of off-road 4x4 trails. But either way, this is something you want to make sure you have turned on, whether you're hunting with side-by-sides and motorized vehicles or not. So we're going to make sure that's on. I'm going to leave the motorized roads tab. Well, we'll just go ahead and turn it on because you need to see that too. And then recreational sites. Right now, I have it turned on. You can see you can flip it on and off. This is going to show you campgrounds. This is going to show you trailheads. And that's going to be the main two things you're looking for, trailheads and campgrounds. That way you know where you can camp, where you can stay, and also how you're going to access these units, because 99% of the time you're going to be accessing an area via a trailhead. So those are the layers and the filters that I use. Let's start jumping into specific units and specific areas and see kind of what's best for your style of hunting. In Colorado, there's several different ways to hunt units, and everyone does it differently. You'll hear some people say, you know, you have to get so many miles off a road. You'll hear other people say it's best, you know, to kind of hunt from your vehicle and cover a lot of ground. You'll have people who want to hike into an area and stay there for a week and then hike out. You'll have people who want to take a side-by-side and go down some of these roads and cover as much ground as they can to listen for elk. Other people just want to find a place to put a camper and then, you know, day hike into certain areas. Everyone has their own preference. There's not necessarily one way that works better for others. Everyone has different tools, different abilities. So we're going to kind of just jump into maybe what works best for you, what works best for other people, and how to pick a unit that's going to utilize and be best for the way you want to hunt. So if we zoom in here, we're going to see unit 7, 8, 191. We already looked into kind of how to look at units and how to see maybe what we can draw and what we can't draw. We know that these units here, unit 7, 8, 191, 19, these are units that with 0 points last year you could draw with 60% certainty, meaning 60% of the people with no points at all could draw these units. So we're going to look over these units. For one, they give us a really good kind of compare and contrast to the different styles of hunts you can do in each, which I really like. So we're going to jump in here and kind of take a look. So the first thing you'll notice, these green lines again are the unit boundaries. So if you follow my mouse, this line here, this green line is the boundary of unit 7. It's also the boundary of unit 8, which follows up here. Depending on what tag you have, it's going to tell you what you can hunt. You got to make sure you stay within those boundary lines. When you're in the field, there is no line on the ground. You're not going to come across a sign that says, hey, you're now in unit 7 or you're now in unit 8. You just always have to know where you are. all of the green, so you'll see kind of all of this is green as opposed to like kind of the brownish gray area up here. All of this gray area, when we zoom in, and you'll see some of the stuff start to show up here, but all of this green here, if we click on it, you'll see it got highlighted. This is Roosevelt National Forest. That's public land. So if you're within these boundaries, not these highlighted areas, but within this green kind of shaded boundary, that is public land, you can hunt it. Okay? If you click outside of it, it's going to tell you, well, it tells you what game management unit it is. It should tell you it's private ground. It doesn't, but this is private ground. So when you click in an area, you'll want to make sure it tells you that it's government lands. You can click over here. You'll see this yellow area here is BLM. BLM, for the most part, is huntable in the state of Colorado. You'll see green is going to be National Forest, yellow is going to be BLM. You'll see this polka dot area over here. We'll click on that. And it's going to tell you it's the Jimmy Creek State Trust, and it's going to say it's public hunting access. So you can hunt this because it has public access. You would not see this area with the polka dots if you did not have your hunt layer on. I'll just show you. This hunt layer right here with the polka dots, Colorado public access. You turn this off. Should have went away. It's not updating. Well, apparently this is not part of the possible access, but a lot of the polka dot areas are going to go away when you remove some of these access. So you want to make sure all of your access is on. There you go. It's a part of the government. So it must be government owned. You turn it back on, you can see back your areas you can hunt and the areas you can't hunt. So it's really important to have these maps. Not only now when you're e-scouting, but also to have some kind of mapping in the field, because like I said, most land in Colorado is not posted. It does not have to be posted to be private land. You just have to know where you are at all times. Going a little further here, you'll see there is a tent here. That's going to be a campsite. You can click on it, and it usually gives you a little bit of information. They'll hold Lake Campground, and then if this is somewhere that maybe you're thinking about camping or staying for a night, you can go Google this, and you can look up and make sure, see if there's any fees or see if there's anything you need to know about that campsite. You'll also see this purple line here on this trail. That's going to be a motorized road or a motorized trail. Usually if it's highlighted purple like that, that means you don't want to drive your truck down it. It's more meant for side-by-sides, Jeeps, that nature, especially in the fall when you're probably going to be hunting. That trail is probably going to be pretty gnarly. So those are the filters you're going to want to have on. We're kind of going to dig in here and kind of get specific into what to look for the certain types of hunts you want to go on. So for a hunter who wants to hunt kind of off the grid, backpack in, not deal with maybe road hunters, maybe not deal with ATVs, wants to get far off the road and get to an area where maybe there's a little less pressure. This is how a lot of guys like to do it. This is how a lot of guys find success. If you've been on Facebook and anyone ever asked some of the sites, hey, how do I find elk in Colorado? I think the number one answer you see on there is get as far off the roads and trails as possible. Now, while I do think there's some truth to that, I think there's some caveats as well, and I don't think that it's necessarily true 100% of the time. But let's dive in. Let's say I'm a hunter who wants to get off the road, maybe wants to backpack in, stay in an area for a few days, and wants to get back in the backcountry per se. I will tell you, a lot of the hunts I go on, that is how I hunt. What I'm going to look for when I go to this hunt map layer again, land and access, we're going to look for wilderness areas.
So when we click this on and off, you're going to see some areas highlight and go away. These striped areas are wilderness areas. Now, every wilderness area has different rules, stuff like that, but typically the difference between a wilderness area and another area is the way you can access it. Wilderness areas almost always have restrictions when it comes to side-by-sides, even e-bikes and stuff like that. There's usually less trails, there's less camping, there's usually just less access in general, and this typically creates an area that the Colorado state considers wilderness. So we're going to kind of zoom in here on some of these areas. You'll see this is a very large area, the Rawa Wilderness Area. This is in Unit 7, so this is an area you can hunt with 0 points. What you'll notice is a lot of these trails, these motorized highlighted trails, they stop on the boundary of this wilderness area. You'll see right where it starts, usually these trails end. What that means is there's no way to access this other than by foot. They don't want any human interaction in here that's not natural. You'll also see there's not a lot of trailhead access here. I see a trailhead here. Looks like there's a trailhead here, but these are very far apart. And it doesn't look like there's much access here on this side, most likely because this looks like, and if we zoom in here with our topo map, this looks like the peak of a mountain anyway, North Rawa Peak. So if we zoom in here and we turn our 3D section of the map on, you're going to see just how steep and gnarly some of this area is, which is why there's not much access from the west side. And this 3D feature of the map, I find very useful to kind of see what is realistically accessible and what's not. Because just looking at a 3D map, you might think you can hike in from this trailhead and maybe hunt this basin over here, even though it's a different unit. Let's just say, though, you were looking at the map and you wanted to hunt over here. Getting over this peak is going to be quite the hassle. So that might not be a spot that you can realistically hunt and get to. We're going to turn the 2D map back on. We're going to zoom out. You'll see here the peak. If you look at your topo maps, you'll see the peak kind of follows essentially the unit boundary, which in Colorado that happens a lot. Unit boundaries can be roads, they can be rivers, and in this case, it is this mountain range. But this Rawa Wilderness Area, we'll zoom in kind of to the middle of it here. You'll see that there are a lot of basins. There are a lot of, turn the 3D back on. There are a lot of basins. There's a lot of area in here in between these trailheads for elk to hide. Elk have to have water, food, and shelter. Having never been in this unit, it just does appear to me that there are a lot of basins here. There's a lot of water. There's also these peaks that the elk can hide up on and stay in the summer range and then drop down here as it gets later in the fall. Again, though, being a wilderness area, this is a spot that you're going to have to access by either foot or horseback. So the advantage to something like this in a wilderness area is going to be to people on foot or on horseback. When it comes to specifics, looking at this area and trying to figure out where you should target, my tip is always get on a trail. If it's during September, you're going to have an advantage because you're going to be able to hear the elk bugle. If you're not hearing elk bugle, you're not in the right spot. Keep moving. The only way to cover a lot of ground in Colorado is on a trail. You are not going to bust brush coming through. You'll see this area here is huge. I would not recommend just taking off into the wilderness. Colorado can be really steep, thick, rough country. We have found the most success staying on trails, and usually we can find elk pretty close to trails. During September, elk are going to be bugling. You're going to hear them. Once you hear elk, once you know where elk are at, and you can get as close to them as you can on a trail, that's usually the time to bail off and start looking for elk that you've already found. Trying to bust brush all day looking for elk, you end up doing more work, burning more calories, and just getting more frustrated by climbing and hiking, going over deadfall, than actually covering ground and finding the animals you want to find. So this wilderness area tool is really good. There's also a roadless area tool you can use if you go up here to hunt layers that will highlight areas that are roadless. That's also another really good tool to use if you're a hunter who wants to get way back in the backcountry and hunt. The disadvantages to hunting a wilderness area like this is that if you come down this trailhead and you get maybe way up here, back in this area, which just looking at it, if I was picking a spot to camp, this area up here with all these lakes looks pretty good. It's really high up, so it's probably going to be really windy, really cold, but you do have a lot of different trail systems branching off, so every morning maybe you can go a different way, a different direction. That's another thing to think about when you're looking for a camping site, is you're going to have water, and you want to be able to move. You don't want to be at a campsite where you can either only go one way or the other, or where you have to hike a long way to find water. But if you were way back in here, somewhere in here, or maybe if you were up here where these trails emerge, it's probably going to take you a full day to get back to the trailhead, and then depending on this road system, I mean, it could take you a day and a half to get to another area that you want to hunt, a day and a half of not hunting, and then you might take another day to hike into another area. So it's not necessarily the easiest to move and be mobile. It's more of a, hey, we're going to go into this area, we're going to huff it for 3 or 4 days and hopefully find elk in that area, knowing that maybe you won't have to fight as much pressure, and maybe the elk are also trying to get away from the pressure, and you'll find them there. There's elk all over the state of Colorado. You can find elk if you're patient, if you go slow, and you know what to look for. Now, if you're a hunter who doesn't want to get way back in the backcountry, maybe that's not your style of hunting. Maybe you want to be more mobile. You're coming to Colorado. You don't know if there's elk down here where these trails collide, and you don't want to spend all this time, money, and resources to come out here and sit in an area for 4 or 5 days and not see any elk. I've done that. I have hiked in. I've went to areas where you have to stay there for a few days just to get out. You don't see any elk. That can be really demoralizing to be in an area where there's just not a lot of elk, and it feels like from the very first day your chances are already lower than what they were. So if you want to stay mobile, if we just jump across to the very next unit, you're going to see already there are way more trailheads, there are way more motorized trails, and there's way more campsites throughout this area. So what that's going to do, that's going to give the advantage to hunters who have side-by-sides or have the ability to cover a lot of ground on a motorized vehicle. So if you were to be in this area, one of the cool things is if you bring your side-by-side out, you're going to be able to get from spot A to wherever spot B is way quicker than somebody on foot. So the advantage goes to you to be able to cover ground. You'll see that this area has what appears to be more open area, more open terrain. Here's Lookout Road. Never been on it. It's purple, so I probably wouldn't plan on taking my truck down it, but you can see there's some more open area, some more open country, some more meadows. Maybe have the ability to take a side-by-side. We're going to hit the 3D here. This might be an area where you could take a side-by-side in glass, and if you find an elk herd, be able to hop back in it and move on that herd. Or if you're not finding elk in the area you are, you'll be able to move. There's multiple campsites, multiple roads. You'll be able to stay very active and move. A lot of people find this they find a lot of success doing it this way by staying mobile, where they can hunt in an area for a day, they can hike in real early in the morning, check out an area, and if they like it, they can go back in the next day, and if they don't, they can go back to their truck and move to a new area. This is a really good tactic for hunters that were new to this state. And a good way to find these areas, if you're using a side-by-side, if you have those tools, is to make sure that you have your roads and trails and you have your motorized trails turned on. Because if you don't have them turned on, there's no way to differentiate these trail roads and these forest roads and trails from any of the other ones. So you want to make sure you have that on. A tip here for these trails that are named roads is pretty simple. Not all areas are accessible. Just because Colorado says it's a road doesn't mean that you can get your truck down it. There are a lot of roads out here that I will not take my Bronco, I will not take a truck. They're just nasty, gnarly spots that I can't even believe the state of Colorado calls a road. In the wintertime, they become usually impassable, and the Park Service will actually come out and gate these trails and roads so people can't get down them, because otherwise they're just spending all day pulling people out of ditches. You'll see on the Facebook, the forums, anytime somebody complains about tags in Colorado or, I'm never coming back to Colorado, one of the first comments I always see is, well, that's another out-of-stater, we don't have to pull out of a ditch. And that is because every year people from out of state come, they see some of these areas that are named roads, and if we zoom in, we could probably find one. See what this is called. Some of them are named trails, some of them are named roads. This is Forest Road 336, it looks like. I don't know how much we're going to be able to see here, but just know that just because Colorado calls this a road doesn't necessarily mean you can actually access it with a vehicle. Most locals out here, when they see purple, they know that that means that's side-by-side, that's a four-wheeler area, that's not to take your truck. So just be careful when you're scouting, when you're looking, if you think you're going to get to an area by driving your truck, really do research. My recommendation would be call the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the officer in that area, and ask them about that specific road. They are much more likely to give you good information if you ask specifics and you have a plan. Ask about specific roads that you're looking at and the time of year you plan on going down them, and they're going to be able to tell you way more information. They will be able to say, oh yeah, that road's mild, you can get your truck down it, just go slow, or hey, that's not a road that, realistically you're going to get very far down. I've gotten on some of these roads where I get a quarter mile down the road and I want to turn around, there's nowhere to turn around. And then you get yourself in a kind of a squirrely situation where, it can get dangerous. So make sure that you have called ahead and you have access to these roads. Another caveat to these roads are some of them get gated. There are some ranchers, there are some other people who will gate public roads. Talking to officers out here, typically what you get told is, yeah, it's a public road, but if there's private on it and it gets gated, a lot of times there's nothing the wildlife office can do, and by the time they do get it resolved, it's too late anyway. So just know some of these roads get gated due to weather, some of them get gated because of public and private pressure with ranchers in the area. So just have a backup plan to get to these areas with these roads. BLM land, if you're looking, is going to be yellow. And if you click on it, it tells you it's BLM. BLM land is just as accessible as National Forest land. So if it's BLM, you can access it. You have to make sure you access it at an accessible point. So if you look down here on this corner, you'll see it turns purple there, which is funny. Some of these areas are going to have little pull-offs where you're able to pull off, excuse me, where you're able to pull off and hunt this land. Others do not. There are a lot of roads like this in Colorado that you cannot park on. They are usually posted that you cannot park. If it's not posted, you usually can park in a spot maybe off the road, but just know that if you're planning on maybe parking right here off County Road 103, you drive however far it takes you to get out here, and then there's a no parking sign here, you're not going to be able to park. There's no way to know if you're allowed to park in an area or not park in an area until you get here, or unless you call ahead to one of the wildlife officers and you ask them about a specific spot and if you can park. So again, my recommendation is before you drive all the way out here, if you have a couple spots in mind, call ahead. That is just really good practice. As a resident out here, if I don't have the ability to drive to a spot and check it in the summer, I will call the wildlife office and I'll say, hey, this is where I want to be. Can I park here? Some of these sites, there's a campsite right here. Some of these sites